Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this September the 9th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska or /Anchorage/Fairbanks or /Juneau. It'll get you to a more localized weather information screen. If you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's online, on the phone, or on this show, please let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is how you find me, and I'm privileged to serve you any way I possibly can. Let's take a look at what's going on across your part of Alaska. We're going to focus on the Noatak and Kobuk River areas, the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula for the first part here today. We're looking at the Willock River, and I hope I said that right. For those of you in the northwestern part of the state, north of the Seward Peninsula and generally north of the Kotzebue Sound region, and inland just a little bit, the Willock River at Tutok Creek has been coming up. Now, it did go down just a little bit here, but recent rains in the last 24 hours or so are likely going to bring that up. So we're expecting that to see some more increases as we go ahead in the next 24 hours there on the Willock River. This is one other potential issue as we go forward. Wednesday into Thursday, so 2 days from now, a strong area of low pressure is going to move over the St. Lawrence Island area and into the outside parts of Norton Sound and southern parts of the Seward Peninsula. The areas shaded in yellow here have the potential to see strong winds, some heavy rain, maybe as much as a ½ inch to 1 inch of precipitation. It's already been pretty soggy up there, and rapid rises on rivers and streams. And again, some of those places in the region, Willock River is north of this, could also see some rises continuing in that area. This from our friends at the Weather Service office in Fairbanks there, so follow them at NWS Fairbanks on Twitter or on Facebook, and you can get more information from them as we go forward again, and all that, of course, is online anytime. So the 48-hour flood potential, this is from the National Weather Service Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center folks, noting the recent rains here across the northwest and the storm that's coming in. Recent rain is going to cause significant rises on the peninsula and the Noatak and Kobuk areas there, and especially the Willock River Basin. So there's no warning out, there's no advisory out, but you are going to see some rises in that area simply because of the impressive amount of rain that we've seen recently, and more to come. So be mindful of where you are in relation to that. Now, as far as fire danger goes, the other side of the coin is all this active weather is happening here across the west. It's not happening quite as fast across eastern parts of the interior. So because of that, fire danger remains at least high in the region. We've started to cut out parts of the western Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage, the Susitna Valley, where rains have been occurring over the weekend, so very good news there. But the Copper River Valley, parts of the Tanana Valley, and the Yukon Flats region are still pretty dry. It's pretty late in the season, but still dangerously dry in many of those locations. As you look at the satellite picture here, you can see that low pressure area working in across southwestern Alaska, southerly winds going up over the Brooks Range, and more active weather coming in out across the southern Bering and the western Aleutians at this point. Notably quiet is southeast, a lot of dry weather going on there. You've got some more clouds than you have the last couple of days. You can see another push coming in out across British Columbia that's working your way toward southeast, but all in all, the main point of the jet stream is well to our south, so we're still not in that main active storm corridor zone. Things could be changing, though, in the next 5 to 7 days or so as remnants of typhoons out across western or eastern Asia are heading our way. Here's a look at the weather map today. Low pressure, as we saw in the satellite picture, sitting across southwestern Alaska. Rain spreading up the west coast into Norton Sound, Unalakleet, into parts of Kotzebue and Kotzebue Sound. And low pressure draped over the Alaska range here, with really the effects of high pressure showing up here with this big bulge of rising isobars, the black lines there of constant pressure pushing northward and telling us that high pressure is in control of the south and southeastern parts of the Gulf of Alaska. Out west, another storm, 972 millibars, marching eastward tonight. That comes up a little bit in its pressure level at 981, but you can see that tight packing of the pressure lines here telling us that there is going to be some wind with this as that works across the central and western chain tonight and tomorrow, likely looking at gales across the region. High pressure out ahead of that starts to give way, pushes south and east. Low pressure across the western Gulf, also trying to get out of the way here. We've got broad areas of showers across western Alaska, rain, fog, and some drizzle across the Bering Strait coastline and into Kotzebue Sound. All along the Brooks Range here, you're going to see visibilities coming up in the aviation section, telling us that IFR and MVFR will be very common in the next several days across the region. Now, there is enough storm energy with this to give us the potential for some convection showers, and not only that, but maybe a few thunderstorms across the central and northern interior as we go through your Tuesday. Low pressure sitting across the southern Gulf, 995 millibars there. High pressure across the northern parts of southeast keeps things pretty dry. Showers from the north slope, rain and drizzle for parts of southwest. A break in the weather, and then we get into the next weather maker moving across the central chain with low pressure pulling a little bit back toward Russia at 973 and dropping again to 969 as we get into Wednesday. Strong and steady southerly flow coming up the west coast, periods of moderate to heavy rain there and wind. And this is again the weather maker that we're talking about, giving us some high surf conditions and probably some heavy rain for the Seward Peninsula, parts of the northern Yukon, and maybe Kotzebue Sound. And again, watching the Woolwich River carefully as we go. As we get into Tuesday, temps in the 40s and 50s in southeast, south central 40s and 50s for you, mid to lower 40s for the central and western interior, Nome 48, Utqiagvik 43, King Salmon and Dillingham just shy of 50 degrees, Sandpoint about 50 as well. South central temperatures tomorrow in the upper 50s and lower 60s, mild for the interior, mid 60s for you, Fort Yukon 63. Southeast in the lower to mid 60s there, Kaktovik only 45, Nome 55, Shishmaref 54. Overnight low temperatures on Wednesday morning are going to be a little bit cooler, 30s and 40s in the eastern interior. Compare that to the west where it's still very mild, 40s and 50s for you, Kotzebue about 52. Southeast you're looking at about 48 in Ketchikan. High temperatures on Wednesday still in the mid 60s for the interior, 59 in Kodiak.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now, you'll notice IFR conditions across the northern Bering and into parts of southwestern Alaska, and especially along the Alaska Peninsula and the western end of Kodiak Island, and certainly around the Kenai Fjords and parts of the Wrangell St. Elias region. Hit and miss across the Gulf. Most of southeast is going to be VFR to start up your day, as well as the low terrain around the Copper River Valley, most of the middle and upper Yukon, as well as the North Slope communities. Out west, we're still looking at IFR conditions to start up your Tuesday. By the afternoon, a lot of improvement in places that saw IFR should go back to MVFR conditions, many areas around the Gulf. Certainly into Prince William Sound, still looking at MVFR, IFR around the Chugach, and then hit and miss up across the Susitna Valley and the western Kenai, southwest, and the western parts of the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound especially, but really most of the Brooks Range, all looking at marginal conditions there with IFR from the central and western end of the chain all the way out toward Shemya and Attu. Up north, IFR pushes away from the north coast. We're looking at VFR conditions there along our villages for Tuesday afternoon. By the time you get to Wednesday morning, IFR across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range and sneaking right back into Utqiagvik and then points east. Looks like most of Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, all the way out toward Kaktovik will probably remain VFR, with IFR lining up again across the central and eastern chain all the way out toward Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, Nikolsky, and up towards St. Matthew and the Pribilovs. It's looking like it's going to center up around Kodiak as we get into Wednesday morning as well. And many areas around the Alaska Range are looking at IFR, but just on the other side of that, as you get into Denali, through Broad Pass and up into the middle Tanana Valley and east, where things look to be VFR by the morning. Southeast, you should expect areas south of Port Alexander into the Dixon entrance, looking at IFR conditions there with VFR for most of the inside passages. That's going to change a little bit more on Wednesday afternoon with MVFR setting in. Hit and miss across some of the central and southern parts, inside and outside for southeast. Northern Gulf Coast communities probably looking okay as you get into Prince William Sound, still looking like VFR, but MVFR right along some of the higher terrain of the Kenai Mountains and the Chugach, including areas around Portage Pass. Cook Inlet looks pretty good. Western parts of the Alaska Range look to be IFR, and then hit and miss across south and west, as well as the North Slope there, looking at hit and miss MVFR conditions, but probably marginal through Anaktuvik and Hadigan Pass. Here are your pass conditions there for tomorrow now, Tuesday, before we get into those marginal changes. Anaktuvik and Hadigan Pass likely IFR for your Tuesday as we go. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass probably holding on to IFR conditions most of the day, as is Rainy Pass and onward to Windy Pass, though you might see some improvement as you get into the afternoon. Isabel Pass looking to be marginal most of the afternoon, with Mentasta Pass A-OK, as we saw north of that into Tanana Valley. Things look to be pretty good. Tanita Pass, IFR to start, maybe some marginal improvement as we go through the afternoon. Portage Pass on the Prince William Sound side looks to be IFR, so west of that, probably okay, but again, if you can't get through, you can't get through. Chilkoot and White Pass looking to be VFR conditions most of the day. Freezing levels show that we've got cool weather situated out to the west, a 4,000-foot line there just south of the Gulf of Anadyr, a 6,000-foot line moving through Prince William Sound and through the central and eastern interior up to 8,000 feet around the Alcan border. So no big surge of cold air coming our way, but you can certainly see the heat rebuilding out across the North Pacific and into the chain, with levels stretching from 6,000 feet around St. Paul and St. George to above 14,000 feet as you get south of the western Aleutians. Icing potential is still pretty limited. Remember that really cold air for the season hasn't really arrived yet. The moisture's here, the cold air isn't. So you have to go above about 9,000 feet in northwestern Alaska to really get into an isolated moderate risk, and it's probably even higher than that by and large. The jet stream shows a strong burst of wind coming in from the north and west across the Chukchi coast at 65 knots and leaving quickly from south to north across the Beaufort Sea coast. The main driver of our weather pattern right now is the Pacific jet that is still mostly south of Alaska. You can see that ridge of high pressure here sitting across the eastern chain and the western Bering, with low pressure sitting across the western Bering and another low across the southern parts of the Gulf. At 9,000 feet, here's that low and another low again that we saw across the western Bering. The broad flow across Alaska right now is from the south, and that is keeping things fairly mild for us, as you would imagine. Low pressure across the Gulf, trying to stir things up for southeastern Alaska, but really being moved along to the east and south by that Pacific jet. At 3,000 feet, again, here's our west and southwesterly flow. Wind speed's fairly light, 10 to 15 knots or so. That should be 10 knots, of course. 45 knots across the Pribilofs, and more of a westerly flow at the central and western chain at this level. Light winds across southeast as well. Turbulence potential then, we're really going to focus out across the Aleutians, especially Adak, Atka, all the way out toward Kiska and Shemya below 4,000 feet. A few minor bumps developing around St. Paul and St. George. Back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Here at the end of the Earth, it still feels like a place for raw exploration and adventure. It's vast in all directions and ground zero for some of the biggest questions we have about the climate. But when we decided to make a series about the frozen places on Earth, we knew there would be one hurdle we would need to jump over first. What is the cryosphere?
The what?
Ooh.
I have no idea.
While I'm aware of the cryosphere, I don't actually know what it is.
It has something to do with ice. All right, that's all I got.
How do you get people acquainted with the cryosphere when most of us don't even know what it is?
Hey, so here we are in Washington, D.C., standing on the roof of NASA headquarters. That's the Capitol building right behind me. And what headquarters does is kind of serve as the focal point to connect the dots.
That's Dr. Tom Wagner, NASA's cryospheric program scientist at headquarters. In short, Tom is responsible for making sure NASA knows what the current status of the cryosphere is.
The cryosphere is everything from the snow that falls by your house to the icy reaches of the Himalayas, to the big ice sheets of Antarctica all the way at the South Pole, and also the frozen ground of the Arctic, and even some of that frozen ground that's currently under the ocean.
If you had to break it down, you'd have a mix of sea ice, snow cover, permafrost, ice sheets, and glaciers.
Right now, our best predictions are that sea levels will rise anywhere from 1 to 3 feet within the next 100 years. 3 feet of sea level rise has the potential to displace about 100 million people, which is a lot of people that need to find new homes.
Our current reality places us at a near tipping point, and the cryosphere is playing a huge part in that delicate balance.
So one of the things people don't know about NASA is that we study the Earth, and we've been doing that since NASA's inception back in the 1950s. And we study the frozen part of the Earth in a variety of ways.
Missions like SNOWX Airborne Snow Observatory, Oceans Melting Greenland, Operation Icebridge, Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, and countless other labs and individual researchers stand at the forefront of monitoring the cryosphere. But this year was a particularly big year.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff of Grace Follow-On, continuing the legacy of the Grace mission of tracking the movement of water across our planet.
2 state-of-the-art satellite missions are being launched in a single year as part of a major attempt to understand Earth's frozen places. Our scientists are answering hard questions, sharing stories from the field, and giving their best predictions for what we can expect of a warming world. We're taking you with us as we follow NASA explorers on their journey to the frozen ends of the Earth as they study our rapidly changing world from satellites, planes, and boots on the ground.
What we can do really well from orbit is we can tell when a surface of land is covered in snow. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
What we think of snow depends a lot on where it falls. If you live in the eastern US, maybe it's fun. Or maybe it's just a pain.
But if you live in parts of the world where they depend on the water that's in the snow for a large fraction of their total water that they use for drinking, for agriculture, for industry, or for hydropower, the snow is a very important natural resource. For example, in the western part of the United States, 80 to 90% of their renewable water comes from snow.
Snow is one part of the cryosphere that many of us have actually encountered before, but it also plays a critical role in regulating the Earth's climate. Through decades of remote sensing, NASA has kept a close eye on the ebb and flow of snow cover.
We now have a 52-year record of snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere, and we can see changes in the extent of snow cover over the time period, particularly in the last few decades, where we can see that the snow cover has been retreating. It's been melting a lot earlier in the springtime.
The extent is relatively easy to do, and it has been done over the years. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
That tricky part is known as the snow-water equivalent, or how much water would actually be in a layer of snow if it melted. NASA and its partners have taken to the air to help solve this elusive mystery. First, there's the Airborne Snow Observatory, or ASO, a small plane outfitted with a couple of instruments, one of which measures snow depth using LiDAR. LiDAR measures distance using light from lasers. Since 2014, ASO has flown over basins in California and Colorado, taking before and after looks at snow depth. Scientists subtract the snow-free summer data from the snow-on winter data to get an idea of the snow depth. There's no single way to measure all types of snow across the globe, and so NASA's other airborne campaign, SnowX, is testing different combinations of sensors. This winter, SnowX will test a new instrument, the Snow-Water Equivalent Synthetic Aperture Radar and Radiometer, or SWISAR.
SWISAR consists of two main components, one of them being the radar and the second one being the radiometer.
So with the radar providing the depth of the snow and the radiometer providing the density of the snow, we could put those two things together and get the snow-water equivalent. Here in the chamber, we're going to measure different radiation patterns at our different frequencies and do some full system testing in this chamber. This chamber kind of enables us to isolate various types of radiation and interference. And in about a month, we're going to take the instrument, mount it on a Twin Otter in the Grand Mesa in Colorado, and we're going to fly it over the Grand Mesa and take various different measurements. This is what we call our engineering flight.
Making sure the sensors are calibrated is key in order to face the challenges nature will throw at them.
Half of the area that gets covered by snow every winter contains trees and forest. And the trees make it difficult for the sensors to see the snow that's underneath the trees, so it makes it difficult for us to measure how much snow there is. After the snow's had a chance to sit on the ground for a while, it gets denser and denser and denser over time, and it changes, which is another reason why snow is very challenging to remotely sense. It doesn't stay the same. It's constantly changing. One of the things that we often do in the field is go dig what we call a snow pit. We literally dig a pit in the snow so we can see all the different layers. The layering is very important.
All this digging is part of ground truthing SnowX, a way of matching up what the airborne instruments see and what is actually sitting on the surface. The ultimate goal of SnowX is to figure out what the best combination of instruments would be for a future satellite mission in order to get a global picture of snow.
We need to know how much snow is in a snowpack, because if we have too much snow and the snow melts too fast, then you can get flooding. And if you don't have enough snow, or if the snow melts too early, that can lead to a longer wildfire season, a more intense drought, and we need to know these things for water resource planning.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice. The latest sea ice analysis has the edge retreating even further northward now. There is some marginal ice that's rotating around in the Beaufort Gyre, but the substantial ice that we've been monitoring really all season continues to move northward. The ice pack is about 350 to maybe 375 nautical miles north now of AKwx, so well away from the coast. And again, the folks are working on the seasonal outlook. We'll have some more information for you in the next week or so. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeast. Light southeasterly winds on the inside, 5 to 10 knots, looking at 2 to 3 foot seas there on the outside. Light northwesterlies coming down the outer coast, 10 to 15 knots, expecting 4 to 5 foot seas on Tuesday. Sharp increase from the winds from southeast up the outer coast there as we get into Wednesday. 20 to 30 knots, anywhere from 6 to 9 foot seas there. You can see that rotating around. Low pressure as it's moving into the central and eastern Gulf. Southeasterlies 10 to 15 for the most part on the inside. Northerlies inside of the Lynn Canal at 10 knots with 2 foot seas on Wednesday. For south central inside of Prince William Sound, easterlies at 15 knots, 3 foot seas there, 4 to 5 foot seas across the north and western Gulf. Inside Cook Inlet, 10 knots, small seas, 2 to 3 feet there. Generally an east to westerly wind on Tuesday, becoming north and easterly as you move into Wednesday afternoon. Easterlies for Prince William Sound, 3 foot seas there, 4 to 5 foot seas across the north and western Gulf. No big change as we go from Tuesday onward into Wednesday. For Tuesday in southwest, looks like light winds and small seas inside of Bristol Bay, a little bit more of a westerly flow coming in to the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds for Shelikof Strait and north and easterly winds coming down the western Gulf, all rotating around low pressure that's well to our south here. We'll keep winds around 15 knots with 5 to 7 foot seas in the region. For Wednesday, though, look for a sharp increase from winds from the south as low pressure to the north and west is pulling in a lot of wind up the west coast and eventually into Bristol Bay. 35 to 40 now, winds coming up across the Bering Sea coast, 9 to 11 foot seas extending out from Bristol Bay. Easterlies over Shelikof, 15 knots, 3 foot seas there, and 25 to 35 knots coming down the Alaska Peninsula coastline in the Pacific, 7 to 12 foot seas on Wednesday. For the chain, remember, low pressure is off to your west and digging in as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. Look for 15 to 30 knot winds for the east and central chain, 35 knots out in the west with a 13-foot sea developing there. By Wednesday, that low pressure system is tracking to the north and east and deepening once again. Notice a strong winds and seas coming up there across areas west of the Pribilofs and north of Adak and Atka. We'll be looking at 30 to 35 knot winds, decent small craft advisories, and likely some low to medium-sized gales in the region. You're looking at about 12 to 15 foot seas in the central and western chain, 14-foot seas in the west, and 13 to 14-foot seas across the Pacific waters as you get into Wednesday afternoon. For the west coast, southwesterly flow coming into St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, 15 knots, 3-foot seas for you. Southerlies over the St. Matthew Island waters, 12-foot seas there. 6-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George, also looking at a southerly flow at 25 knots. Light southwest winds coming into the Kuskokwim Delta region. We'll be watching for some choppy conditions there as we get into Wednesday, and maybe some elevated surf, but we're not looking at any warning level or advisory level issues just yet. But watch this space for more. We may have some more changes as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, and the folks at the Anchorage and the Fairbanks weather forecast offices are watching this very carefully. A southeasterly flow will be working over St. Lawrence Island and off the Yukon Delta and through the Norton Sound region. Looks like we could have some choppy conditions there around the southern Seward Peninsula coastline, including areas around Nome. 30 knots with a 6-foot sea, 12-foot seas around St. Matthew, 13-foot seas for St. Paul and St. George on that 30-knot wind, and again 40 to 45-knot winds across parts of the west coast for your Wednesday. For the North Slope, much calmer conditions. North and easterlies there, 2 to 3-foot seas on a 10 to 15-knot wind, and light and somewhat variable winds here across the Chukchi coast for Tuesday. That'll become a little more from the southeast as we see on Wednesday, with winds up to 20 to 40 knots. 4-foot seas north of the Bering Strait, south of that again around St. Lawrence Island and through the Strait, Wales, Port Clarence and Nome. You're talking about 40-knot winds on a 13-foot sea just to your west. And recapping tonight's weather, low pressure will be digging in across the western Bering, 981 millibars tonight. Ridge of high pressure is out ahead of that, and that is pushing showers in across the western parts of Alaska. We're looking at low pressure across the western Gulf. That's tracking eastward as we go into Tuesday. By Wednesday, it'll start slinging some more wind into parts of southeastern Alaska, but a couple quiet days prior to that. There might be just enough instability for showers, maybe even a few thunderstorms across parts of the central and western sections of the interior tomorrow. Showers for the North Slope. In the west, that low pressure system continues digging in toward the west coast by Wednesday. Watch for stronger south winds and some choppy surf conditions developing in your area. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.